Is weird, odd, strange, or just plain bizarre is really your cup of tea? Then the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast will give you that fix. Can't believe it? Well, listen for yourself as we deliver the strangest news you definitely won't find on CNN or Fox. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Brittany Lawrence. In researching for stories for this episode, I started to notice a recurring thematic element: Florida Man. Apparently, he has been super busy recently. The stories range from the infuriating to the insane. There is something about Florida that seems to bring out the crazy in the general population. It's true, though. Just for the heck of it, I started Googling the other state names like New Mexico Man, Colorado Man, and honestly, no other state came up with anything nearly as weird as Florida. And it had multiple pages. So today is both a World Weird News episode and also an homage to all things Florida Man. Before we get into our first batch of Florida Man stories, though, we are going to get our feet wet with a sweet update about a very old story involving a very devoted orca. Then an equally as dedicated man who really wanted to make sure his grocery store was disinfected, because you can never be too safe during a pandemic. Then we'll jump right into the best Florida Man has to offer. Best or worst, I'm not sure, but it's what he's offering, so there's that. First, he's hanging off the hood of a semi on the highway, and then he's Batman. Both equally as insane, one slightly less deadly. And if you stick around to the end of the show, we'll be counting down the top 10 craziest natural phenomenon. Let's get going. Our first story, many of you may remember, a story that garnered quite a bit of attention around 2 years ago, when an endangered orca, known as Tahlequah or J35, carried her dead calf for 17 days and more than 1,000 miles. She, along with her pod, grieved the death of her calf in a beautiful and heartbreaking way. An article in USA Today notes in 2018, the Center for Whale Research press release said about her dead newborn, a nearby resident recounted watching Tahlequah with other mourning orcas. At sunset, a group of 5 to 6 females gathered at the mouth of the cove in a close, tight-knit circle, staying at the surface in a harmonious circular motion for nearly 2 hours. After dark, they stayed directly centered in the moonbeam, even as it moved. Tahlequah then carried her dead calf with her for the next 17 days, even moving the baby up with her for air. Though 2 other babies have been born to her pod since she lost her own, Tahlequah is now pregnant again, and people in the region and scientists are taking a particular interest in this new pregnancy. Tahlequah is an endangered southern resident orca, or commonly known as the killer whale, whose population frequents the Salish Sea, near British Columbia and Washington State. They are extremely endangered, and the current population stands at 72. With such a small population, every successful birth is hugely important for recovery, wrote Sea Life Response Rehabilitation and Research in a Sunday press release, confirming the identification of the pregnant whale through drone photos. Though exciting, Tahlequah's pregnancy is far from over, and the loss rates among mothers is extremely high, around 2/3. Researcher Sam Wasser of the Center for Conservation Biology at the University of Washington State has found. Stress from hunger because of a lack of salmon is linked to the whale's poor reproductive success, according to his research. Several of the juveniles in the pods also are already looking thin, Holly Fernbach, Marine Mammal Research Director for SR3, said. These are stressed whales out there, critically stressed, she said. When Tahlequah was pregnant for the first time, it was the first calf born in the area for 3 years. This baby is very important for the dwindling population. The southern residents have since had 2 more calves, both of which are still alive. But Tahlequah's new pregnancy carries special meaning for a region that grieved the death of her calf with her. During those 17 days, 2 years ago. Especially as the new pregnancies move forward, it is important that boaters give the whales plenty of space and the quiet they need, said Fernbach and John Durbin, senior scientist of Southall Environmental Associates. Whale use sound, known as echolocation, to hunt, and often boat disturbance and underwater vessel noise is a huge threat to their survival. Lack of available and adequate salmon and pollution round out the reasons they are so critically endangered, and also why the stakes are so high for this new calf to be born and survive under the harsh conditions. I know that first story was kind of one of those, wait, am I sad or happy? And it's okay to be both. I mean, pregnancy after loss is beautiful across species lines. Here's hoping humanity can get its act together to actually support these beautiful creatures, though, because it won't mean much otherwise. With that being said, we all may need a bit of a sweet animal chaser after that, and I have just the thing. Enter a little goat named Mr. Mayhem, the paddleboarding goat. His one greatest love is to get out with his owner and do cool goat things. His owner, Alyssa Kepi, a Boise resident who decided that her goat seemed pretty adventurous and obviously would enjoy doing super goat activities like paddleboarding, as he was already an avid hiker and loves riding in the car. He might think he's a person, said Alyssa. Obviously. Unlike most people, Mr. Mayhem has only taken 2 spills since entering the world of semi-professional water sports. In the most adorable ensemble ever created, he puts safety first and wears a life jacket and swim goggles. Mr. Mayhem has been out on the board over 20 times, and as far as goat paddleboarders go, he could be considered the first professional goat paddleboarder. Mostly because there aren't any non-professional ones, so he's pretty much the gold standard. I also didn't realize that what I was missing in my life was a goat. I'm lying. I've been trying to convince my husband to buy me a goat for years. Literally years. He doesn't seem as convinced as I am about all of the joy that would bring to our lives. Plus, he wouldn't have to mow anymore. Okay, now that we're feeling a bit better, I'm going to turn that train right around and head to Florida, where one man had lost his mind and was seen holding on for dear life onto the hood of a semi-truck barreling down a Florida highway. It started out when shortly after 1 p.m. on Saturday, Florida Highway Patrol got a call about a disoriented white male who had abandoned his vehicle on an exit ramp near Boynton Beach. That same man then jumped the concrete divider between the turnpike's southbound and northbound sides, causing traffic to slow, and waved for Edward Hughes, the driver of a semi heading down the highway, to stop. Hughes stopped, but that's when he reported that the man jumped on his windshield and started using a metal object to hack away at the glass. That's when Hughes panicked and just started to drive. All the while, the enraged man was just holding on for dear life, which honestly maybe isn't the best turn of phrase, since someone who is jumping on the hood of semis and trying to break the windows obviously doesn't hold their life very dear, but I digress. The damage is pretty gnarly, and despite being on the windshield of a moving truck, the man did manage to break through a bit with whatever object he was using. The man remained on the hood of the rig for 9 miles before police were able to arrive and pull Hughes over and take the man into custody. It's pretty mind-blowing to watch the video, where it looks to be a man yelling, "Help me," as he's being thrown side to side on a swerving big rig. Amateur video shot by another motorist on the turnpike shows Hughes jerk the truck by accelerating and then pressing hard on the brake in an effort to jar the man off the hood. Hughes also tried to weave in and out of lanes, but to no avail, as the man kept on stubbornly clinging to the windshield. The troopers took the man into custody and drove him to Wellington Regional Hospital, where he was being evaluated on Saturday. Every article I read has said that it wasn't immediately clear if there would be any charges filed against either the hitchhiker or the driver, though I imagine there will be at some point. I'm not sure of the implications from the driver, as I suppose driving with someone on your hood may not have been the best course of action, but fear will make you do crazy things. Also, in the video you can hear someone saying to call the cops, but the person filming says that the content is just too good. Can we just talk about that for a moment here? I know that in the age of TikTok and the instant gratification that is the internet, can we just start to make a commitment that we will put human life in front of viral fame? I know that's a hard sell, but I think it would solve a lot of our societal issues if we came to regard human life as something that was real and not just a sideshow. Obviously, it was jarring to see, and in retrospect, now that we know everyone survived, even humorous. But if any amount of time could have been saved by reporting the issue sooner, rather than focusing on filming some man's mental breakdown and another's fear-induced attempt to end that breakdown, it would have been worth it. Plus, if things had ended differently, I think this video would prove to be a lot more concerning. So let's just be kind to each other. With that being said, let's stick around Florida for a moment and meet Batman, where a Southwest Florida man is accused of wandering around a hotel naked and identifying himself as the masked hero. Authorities said Christopher L. Jackson, 49, of Inglewood, was arrested on Friday and charged with loitering and exposure, according to the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office. The would-be superhero was thwarted when the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office responded to a call at the Suncoast Inn in Inglewood late Friday, after the motel's manager reported a naked man had tried to enter his room, Wink TV reported. When deputies responded, they found Jackson at a table outside, and he claimed to have a room, but the manager denied that he had a room there. I made multiple attempts to obtain his name and date of birth, which he replied with, "I'm Batman," the deputy wrote in an arrest report. The arrest report is a veritable romp through what should be a Todd Phillips movie. After seeking out the hotel's security footage, the deputy reported that the video footage showed Jackson climbing through the guardrail that lines the building. Jackson then went to the third floor and stripped off his clothing, then began to go door to door in an attempt to gain entry to rooms, according to the arrest report. Eventually, the mentioned deputy gratefully found Jackson's clothes and, in a plot twist that surprised no one, found a glass pipe among his belongings. Upon his arrest, they found out that Jackson had a warrant out of Sarasota County for a larceny charge. He remains in the Charlotte County Jail on $1,000 bail. To be fair, none of this sounds incredibly strange to me. I worked as a night auditor in a hotel for a while, and it was by far my craziest job. I've had people walk in bloodied from bar fights as if I'm an EMT. People half-clothed and looking for rooms, the unfaithful trying to be discreet but failing miserably as the wives have shown up on many occasions. But my favorite story of all, and this is absolutely true, is when a man showed up at the hotel I was working at, a little after midnight, wearing nothing but overalls, no shirt underneath, and looking bedraggled. I began making small talk as I got him registered, and he informed me that he was here so late because his house was flooded. When I asked him what happened, he said he was going to the bathroom before bed, but when he opened his toilet lid, he saw a snake in his toilet bowl. So he figured the only rational thing to do would be to grab his shotgun and shoot the toilet. So the snake was gone, but his house was now flooded due to the exploding toilet. So I suppose depending on where your priorities are, you could consider it a successful night. Talk to any hotel worker, the stories will blow your mind. I've never met Batman, though, so Florida, I guess, still wins. We've stayed pretty weird so far. When we come back, we've got a new batch of stories, which include a prison break, meet a man who really wanted to sanitize his grocery store, and 2 Florida men who use ill-begotten funds to buy extravagant things.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back. In our last segment, we learned why a pregnant whale is both heartbreaking and exciting. and the goats are still absolute gifts. We also headed to Florida and hung out with a Florida man on the hood of a fast-moving semi and naked Batman. We've got a lot more to cover, and if you hang out till the end, we will be counting down the top 10 natural phenomena as compiled by Listverse. If cartoons have taught us anything, it's that the only real way to escape from jail is by tying bedsheets together. It's just how it's done. One Oklahoma man took this to heart as he made his semi-successful attempt. Though initially successful, authorities in Oklahoma City reported that they did eventually find the murder suspect, who had used a rope made of bedsheets to escape from the 12th floor of an Oklahoma jail. 12th floor, y'all. There were actually 2 men who made the attempt. Officials told Coco TV that at around 5:30 a.m. on Friday, Oklahoma County Detention Center inmates Jose Hernandez and Pablo Robledo broke a cell window and shimmied down the building using linens tied together. Images captured by the station show a massive cloth rope made of multiple linens hanging from the 12th floor window. It's pretty comical to see, really. Unfortunately for Hernandez, he fell around the 4th floor. He broke his leg and was found not long after the attempt and rearrested. So his sweet freedom was short-lived. Robledo actually escaped, however, and it led to an hours-long manhunt. He was eventually taken back into custody Friday afternoon by Oklahoma City police. In a much larger prison break story, in South Africa on July 26th, 68 prisoners overpowered understaffed prison guards and upon locking the 3 guards in a cell, escaped from their prison. As of Sunday morning, the remaining 3 of the 69 inmates who escaped from the Malmesbury prison on Friday have now been rearrested. The Department of Correctional Services said Justice and Correctional Services Minister Ronald Lamola on Saturday condemned the reckless behavior of the inmates and said the department would make sure they were punished for their actions. Furthermore, some of the problematic inmates have been transferred out of the facility to the maximum facilities in the region, Lamola said. After the arrest of the remaining 3, Lamola thanked all role players for their willingness to assist law enforcement agencies with critical information. I can't seem to find much information about where the inmates went, how they were found, what they were doing. It seems like a large amount of escapees to not have that information. It's a crazy story, as the prison was woefully understaffed, so much so that they were almost comically overpowered, enough so to be locked in the very cells they were supposed to be guarding. One thing I'm noticing through doing these podcasts, though, is that most people who are committing crimes don't seem to have a huge aptitude for planning. Even the ones who find partial success usually foil their own plans. I feel like this prison break could have gone a bit better, at least for the few, if they had figured out exactly what they were going to do upon escape. Like, okay, you're out now, what's next? That's usually what gets you arrested again. With that being said, it looks like they have all been found and order has been restored. So that's a good thing. As far as poor planning goes, though, our next story may win the prize. If the prize was the destruction of property you actually own. A COVID-obsessed Australian man in WA County, the co-owner of the only supermarket in a small town, burnt down his business at the height of the COVID pandemic because he was obsessed with the virus and was being put under pressure by angry customers and out-of-town panic buyers, a Perth court has been told. On March 25th, 57-year-old Edward Guy Mason went into his store on Bruce Rock and packed 3 shopping carts with cardboard and set them on fire, and then sadly attempted to take his own life. None of the stories expound on this, but he was apparently unsuccessful at the last part and eventually left his burning business and walked home, where he was eventually arrested. Residents saw the fire and authorities were called, but it was too late for both the grocery and the hardware store owned by Mason's brother, which was attached to the same building. The fire caused over $1 million in damage. Mason eventually pleaded guilty to the charge of willfully and unlawfully damaging a building by fire. According to court records, Mason's mental health had been on the decline for months and had only been made worse by the impending doom mentality brought on by the coronavirus pandemic. It had caused mass panic buying of toilet paper and hand sanitizer, which was affecting his stock levels. Customers were becoming angry about the items not being available and also about all of the extra hygiene levels Mason had put in place as a result. His lawyer, Richard Lawson, said Mason then became convinced he had the virus, and to protect his customers and the public from getting infected, he had to burn down his business, later repeatedly telling witnesses, "I set fire to business to kill the germs." He decided he had to eradicate himself, Mr. Lawson said. This story made me incredibly sad, as mental health is such a looming issue in our society today, and it has been put even further on the back burner since the onslaught of COVID-19. The problem with that is isolation is only furthering some people's lingering issues, and I think we'll be seeing a lot more of this as we continue to press on. Since being arrested, Mason's mental health has actually improved since he's begun taking his antidepressant medication and has been receiving counseling. Upon his arrest, the courts received upwards of 17 character references for Mason, claiming he was well-liked and respected in the community. Most expressed surprise that he had actually gone through with such a thing, but they had noticed he was under extreme pressure to keep up with the demands and trying to maintain happy and healthy customers. In an amazing turn of events, Judge Pryor, who had originally imposed a 16-month jail sentence, recently suspended it. Noting that Mason had never committed any offense before, he had spent 4 months in custody, had pleaded guilty at an early opportunity, and was genuinely remorseful. He also said that the community of Bruce Rock was supportive of Mason, and there was a real risk that any further time in custody might undermine the positive steps he had taken to rehabilitate himself. However, Judge Pryor did make an order that Mason pay his brother $479,000 to compensate him for the damage that was caused to the hardware store. We're going to head back to Florida, where Florida man has gotten into more trouble with far less genuine motives than our previous story. In a wacky opener, a Florida man walked into a car dealership in Okaloosa County in the Panhandle and left with a Porsche. That's not entirely strange, except for the fact that he paid for the Porsche with a cashier's check. But that check was printed from his home computer. Officials say 42-year-old Casey Williams Kelly was arrested for grand theft of a motor vehicle and uttering a false banknote after it was reported to Walton County Sheriff's Office that he attempted to purchase Rolex watches with a bad check. So, he made it out with the Porsche, but, as seems to be the way things go in criminal world, got caught because he kept trying his luck. During the investigation, it was determined Kelly had purchased a Porsche 911 Turbo from a Porsche dealership in Destin by using a fraudulent check written for $139,203.05 on July 27th. The Porsche was reported stolen to the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office. This was insane to me. First of all, the fact that there are people in the world who have the ability to write checks for $139,000 so often that this wasn't seen as anything out of the ordinary, and they just let this guy drive off with a brand new Porsche, no questions asked. I feel like there had to be some signs this dude wasn't legit. The Rolex guy wasn't having it, though. Officials say the next day, Kelly presented a check in the amount of $61,521 to the jeweler in Miramar Beach, attempting to purchase 3 Rolex watches. However, the jeweler kept the watches until they could determine if the check would cash. Thursday, they reported to WCSO the check was a fake. When arrested Wednesday afternoon, Kelly told investigators he printed out the cashier's check from his home computer and did not get the cashier's check from his bank. In one of the million ways I could never be a successful criminal, I would never even think to try and print a cashier's check from home, and also would just assume that something like that would never work. But you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, or something like that, right? And literally, in an even worse display of fraudulent car purchase, another Florida man bought a Lamborghini with money he received from illegal coronavirus funds. Florida business owner David Hines applied for the Paycheck Protection Program and received over $4 million in funds. Though the money was supposed to be used for employee benefits, payroll, all the important stuff, he instead went out and purchased a $318,000 Lamborghini. He soon took to the beach in his fancy sports car and took himself on a nice shopping spree as well. As if the Lambo wasn't enough, Hines also spent $4,600 while shopping at Saks Fifth Avenue, as well as thousands more on fancy hotels and jewelry, according to the Washington Post. Once again, another case of failing to keep a low profile, and it not really working out for him. Hines was arrested and charged with making false statements to a lending institution, bank fraud, and engaging in transactions in unlawful proceeds. Collectively, Hines falsely claimed his companies paid millions of dollars in payroll in the first quarter of 2020. Brian Mesmella, a U.S. postal inspector, said in an affidavit. State and bank records, however, show little to no payroll expense during this period. A lawyer for Hines said he's anxious to tell his side of the story. David is a legitimate business owner who, like millions of Americans, suffered financially during the pandemic, he told the Post, while acknowledging the severity of the allegations. The Miami Herald reported that federal investigators linked Hines with the sports car after he was involved in a hit-and-run accident earlier this month. When the bank froze Hines' corporate accounts, they showed a balance of $3,463,162, but no repayments on the loans. When the PPP loans first came out, we were excited about the prospect as my husband is self-employed, though we missed the first cutoff. It was infuriating when we found out how many large businesses were receiving the funds we actually needed for our family. So this story really made me angry. It's one thing to fraud a car dealership with home-printed checks. To be fair, that's on them for being goofy. But to openly fraud people who need the money for their small businesses, and upon receiving funds, spend the money in ridiculous ways? The PPP offers billions of dollars in potentially forgivable loans to keep workers on the payroll, guaranteed by the Small Business Administration. In David's case, according to the complaint, Hines applied for approximately $13.5 million in PPP funds to pay employees. However, it's alleged that these employees either didn't exist or were paid a fraction of what Hines claimed. Hines' state and bank records showed little to no payroll expense. The complaint alleges that Hines tried to secure $13.5 million in PPP loans on behalf of 4 different companies. Those companies were Unified Relocation Solutions, LLC, ProMaster Movers Incorporated, Cash and Holdings, LLC, and WePack Moving, LLC. At least one of those companies was listed as inactive on the Florida Department of State website. 2 others were reinstated in March of 2020. None of the companies have websites, and investigators reported that many online reviews on third-party sites allege bait-and-switch practices and other deceitful activities. So this dude was just out here creating companies, fake employees, and payroll scams, and then buying Lambos? I hope he enjoyed his short descent into the lifestyle of the rich and famous, because I don't think he will have another chance at that again, at least not for a really long time. We've kept the weird news going, and when we come back, we will learn about a rare flower with the least appetizing smell, find a prosthetic leg in a strange place, and finish our vacation in Florida with a man with 2 hands and holding 2 very different things, and meet one of the unluckiest Florida guys in the whole state.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
More than 9 years ago, Dr. Ashley McCaskill was surprised to find that she could buy a very rare corpse flower from a nursery in North Carolina, especially since they were not sold commercially. She planted it during the 2010-11 academic year in the greenhouse on UNG's Dolinga campus. The Titanorum is known for having the biggest inflorescence or flower structure in the plant world, said McCaskill, a professor of biology at UNG. It's right up there with the giant redwoods in Northern California in terms of botanical record holders. Commonly called the corpse flower, the plant has 3 unusual characteristics. The inflorescence grows between 6 and 8 feet tall, takes 8 to 10 years to bloom for the first time, and smells like rotting meat or a rotting corpse once it blooms. It's actually a super beautiful flower for it to have such a terrible smell. The idea of smelling something like that is literally from my nightmares. After its first bloom, it takes an average 2 to 4 years to bloom again. It looks like something surreal out of a movie with its flowing petals and large size. McCaskill purchased the plant along with others for 2 years to use as a teaching tool for her students and built a collection in the greenhouse. I wanted to have some really charismatic plants that would pique students' curiosity and convince them that plants are really cool, she said. They aren't exposed to a lot of plants, especially exotic ones like the Titan arum. In late April, McCaskill got an unexpected surprise. The corpse flower, named Carol by UNG faculty, showed signs of blooming for the first time in early May, and she would have a front row seat to watch it. I was shocked it was happening so soon. I thought it would be several more years, McCaskill said. I am just in such anticipation for the bloom. I have been waiting for this for 8 years. Her excitement, though, was coupled with disappointment. UNG students, faculty, and staff, as well as area plant enthusiasts, could not watch the momentous event unfurl because of the COVID-19 pandemic. I was planning to have a blooming party, but now that's not possible, McCaskill said, explaining the last corpse plant to bloom in Georgia was 20 years ago at the Atlanta Botanical Garden. The last corpse flower to bloom in the United States was in March 2020 in Minnesota. Most corpse plants in the United States are grown in botanic gardens or at colleges and universities, since they only grow in nature on the island of Sumatra in Indonesia. Their habitat in Sumatra is being destroyed, so they are now listed as endangered by the scientific body that monitors plant species populations, McCaskill said. UNG faculty members and staff decided to share the important occasion with local media and educators throughout the region by recording the bloom and showing in a time-lapse video. But also, they did a Facebook Live where people could ask questions about the rare event while Carol is in bloom. In a less smelly story, a man who lost his prosthetic leg while rafting has now been reunited with his appendage, thanks to a Missouri police dive team. Mike Evans of Woodson Terrace said he and some friends were rafting on the Merrimack River on Saturday when he and a friend decided to walk in the water for a while. They apparently came up on some deeper water, and upon swimming back to safety, he noticed his prosthetic leg was missing. When I pulled myself onto the raft, I noticed immediately that my leg felt lighter, Evans told the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Then I realized it was gone. Evans said he and his friends searched the river, but were unable to locate any sign of his lost limb. He said the leg would cost $27,000 to replace, and would be too expensive for him even with insurance paying a portion of the cost. I understand this to some degree. My eldest has a club foot, and we have had so many braces and surgeries, and without the help of Scottish Rite, which is a specific children's orthopedic hospital, that cost would have fallen squarely on our shoulders, and that is not something I would have been eager to endure. A Missouri state trooper heard about Evans' situation and contacted him via Facebook on Sunday night to request more information so he could send a dive team to search for the leg. Trooper said the dive team arrived at the river about 9:30 a.m. Monday and had located the leg by noon. It was a happy ending to a stressful few days, Evans said. Once when my husband and I were rafting, we found a wallet that belonged to someone who was actually floating around the same time. It was a fortuitous moment, and we felt really good about it. Unfortunately, later, my husband also lost one of his favorite hats to the river, and though we looked for it a really, really long time, we never found it and did not get so lucky as to meet anyone else who had found it either. There are plenty of people who basically make it a career to find lost items in rivers and oceans and lakes all over the United States. My dad just bought a large magnet-type thing to go fishing in the pond on their property. So far, he hasn't been lucky enough to find much more than random metal poles, but here's hoping he pulls up some unearthed treasure soon enough. In our final jaunt to visit Florida Man, we head to the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, where a man in Wilmalma was arrested on Saturday, after reports that he was waving a firearm at citizens while walking down the road. At 11:49 a.m. on Saturday, the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office received multiple calls from citizens that a man walking near Railroad Street and State Road 674 was pointing a gun at vehicles driving by. Deputies arrived within minutes and located the armed man walking south on Railroad Street. Eric Ricardo Felder, 66, was still holding and carelessly waving the firearm around in one hand, with a beer in the other. Deputies took him into custody without incident. Felder was in possession of a loaded .38 Smith & Wesson revolver. He was arrested and charged with felon in possession of a firearm, 2 counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, use of a firearm while intoxicated, improper exhibition of a dangerous weapon, and resisting arrest without violence. With an intoxicated person handling a loaded gun in public, this is an incident that could have potentially ended very badly. I am thankful that our deputies were able to quickly locate Eric Felder and arrest him without anyone getting hurt, said Sheriff Chad Chronister. Threatening the safety of others and putting innocent citizens' lives at risk is unacceptable and will not be tolerated in Hillsborough County. Now we're going to stay in Florida, but this time in Fort Myers, where an unlucky man was recently vacationing with his family. Justin Stuller was looking forward to relaxing in the Florida Keys, fishing, lobstering, and swimming with his wife and kids, extended family, and friends, until he was bitten by a shark. Stuller, 38, now sports 24 stitches and a small limp after he tangled with an 8-foot lemon shark Wednesday. Why are we going in the ocean? I still don't understand it. Stuller said he has encountered sharks before on similar trips. Some have even snatched fish he speared as he swam back to the boat. But he's never been bitten before. At least, not by a shark. I did get bit by an alligator, he said, and a spider, he said, showing the scars of both on his leg. An experienced diver, certified since age 12, Stuller had spotted an injured fish in the rocks underwater and went to retrieve it. It was too small, not a keeper, he said Sunday. He went to put it back into the rocks and away from his wife and kids who were swimming nearby. I put it in a hole, and right before I surfaced, wham! He said of the attack. I felt the skin more than the shark. It rolled me over, and I saw it swimming away. Stuller said nobody noticed anything at first until he surfaced and started yelling. Friend and co-worker Jake Dorn was swimming nearby. Stuller's first thought was for his family and friends. My wife and kids were swimming, he said, so we got them out of the water. On the boat, Stuller, his wife, and friends got a look at the 5 to 6 inch bite just below his knee, as well as a few other puncture marks on his leg. He said his wife, Kristen, was looking over his shoulder when he took his hands away from the wound and let out a gasp when she saw the damage. Her first words, he said, were, "We're going to the hospital." Well, of course you're going to the hospital. You just got bit by a shark. Until that point, Stuller said they had been having a fantastic time, hitting the state limit of spiny lobsters. Stuller said he makes sure to keep a complete medical and first aid kit on his boat and had plenty of gauze and pressure bandages to stem the bleeding. I tied it off and actually lost very little blood, he said. It was pretty deep, but no bone. I was very lucky, no tendons. Apparently everyone stayed calm, he said, even his 4-month-old, 2-year-old, and 10-year-old children. I think at this point they were probably desensitized to their father getting bit by angry animals. I was thinking, I've got 3 kids on the boat. I have to stay calm, his wife said. In fact, the kids thought it was kind of cool to see a shark. After getting stitched up at a Florida Keys Memorial Hospital, Stuller said they went back out the next day with him as captain, not a diver. He was Mr. Grumpy Pants the second day, his wife laughed. Dorn said they are not usually worried about sharks. I've been lobstering here for years, he said. You see sharks and they usually swim around you. Stuller said he thinks the shark was interested in the fish he had just stowed on the seabed. I've got nothing against the shark, no ill will, he said. Right place, wrong time. I was more angry I couldn't go in the water the next day. I don't feel like I have to mention my fear of sharks again, but I will. We need to stay away. You may not harbor them any ill will, but they are obviously out to get us. And this is just one more instance that I am proven right by my absolutely not irrational fear. And that's it. When we come back, we will be counting down the top 10 most insane natural phenomena.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
And we're back. Before the break, we met a foul-smelling but extremely rare corpse flower, a lost and found river-bound prosthetic leg, and 2 Florida men intent on being the craziest and most unlucky. We're going to close out the show by counting down the top 10 unexplained natural phenomena as compiled by Listverse. The world is beautiful and crazy and absolutely bonkers, and there are so many things we still don't understand. Here are just a few. Number 10. Star jelly. Rain, snow, sleet, hail. No, these aren't the 4 elements, but they are virtually everything one would expect to fall from the sky at any given time. Oddly enough, despite how accurately we can track and predict precipitation, there is something that has fallen from the air that we have absolutely no knowledge of. Star jelly. Star jelly is a translucent, gelatinous material often found in grass or on trees that is known to evaporate soon after being witnessed. Many have reported seeing the substance fall from the sky, leading to myths that the material comes from dying stars, alien excrement, or even government drones. Documentation of the strange substance dates back to the 14th century, when doctors were known to use the star stuff to treat abscesses. Of course, scientists must have studied this weird element to discover its origin, right? Well, kind of. Some believe the jelly to be frog ovum that is expanded from exposure to water. But the problem with this idea is that the jelly has been shown to contain no plant or animal DNA, further adding to its long list of perplexing aspects. Number 9. As pillow-like as they appear, clouds are not soft and fluffy. They are made of evaporated water and would presumably be very unpleasant to fall upon, unlike the aforementioned pillows. Because clouds are made of water, we can understand their shapes and movements and use this data to help predict future weather, at least most of the time. Morning glory clouds are long, tube-shaped clouds that travel across the sky rather ominously, reaching lengths of over 965 kilometers or 600 miles. These vapors are often most witnessed in Australia during the transition from the dry to wet season. The Aboriginal people in the area explain that the clouds is an omen predicting an increase in the bird population. Other than Aboriginal myths, not much is understood about why or how morning glory clouds form. Some climate scientists postulate that the clouds form from the unique combination of sea breezes and humidity changes. But so far, no computer models have been able to accurately predict this odd weather event. Number 8. Cities in the sky. No, this isn't some comic book nonsense or something from an old world religion. This is real. On April 21, 2017, in Jiaying, China, numerous citizens were awestruck by the image of a city floating on the clouds above them. Many took to the internet to post pictures and just generally freak out. But there was really no cause for concern, as it has happened before. The same floating cities were recorded at 5 different locations in China in just over 6 years prior to this event. This number of events has led theorists to hypothesize various possibilities. Aliens are attempting to cross over from a different dimension, the second coming of Christ is here, or the images are holographic tests by the Chinese government, or maybe even the U.S. government? Well, there is a possible explanation. A rare weather event known as Fata Morgana, where light passing through heat waves causes a duplication effect. This would be an acceptable explanation if the images in the sky were not different than the skyline below them. Number 7. Tabby Star. The universe is unfathomably vast, and there are billions of galaxies that our descendants may one day get to explore. But we needn't leave our own Milky Way to find mysterious wonders beyond our comprehension. Enter Tabby Star. KIC 8462852, nicknamed Tabby Star after its discoverer Tabitha Boyan, is one of the over 150,000 stars that has been observed by the Kepler Space Telescope. What is so unique about Tabby Star is how often and drastically its light dips. Stars are usually observed for dips in the light that indicate planets are passing in front of them. Tabby Star is so strange because its light drops by up to 20% at a time, a massive amount compared to other stars we have observed. Explanations for this strange light activity vary greatly, from large clusters of planets passing by, very unlikely, to great buildups of dust and debris, not normal for a star of Tabby's age, to aliens. One leading theory is that an alien civilization is using massive machines orbiting the star to procure energy. While this may seem outlandish, it is far more interesting than space dust. Number 6. Raining cats and dogs and spiders. One of the many laws of the universe is that everyone is either a dog person or a cat person. These two options encompass all of humanity. While virtually everyone loves animals, it would not be healthy to love them so much that one would want them to literally fall from the sky. If you love animals that much, maybe you should seek professional help. But before you do, we have good news for you. While not a common occurrence, flightless animals falling from the sky is an actual weather phenomenon. While typically not dogs or cats, many animals have been recorded falling from the sky along with rainwater. Some examples include frogs, tadpoles, spiders, fish, eels, snakes, and worms. Not a pleasant picture. The current leading theory is that these animals were lifted into the sky by waterspouts or tornadoes occurring in their natural habitat. Sadly, this has never been witnessed or recorded by scientists. If this theory happens to be true, it does not explain a similar circumstance where raw meat fell from the clear Kentucky sky in 1876. Yeah, figure that one out. Number 5. Bloody Sky. Quick quiz. What are the signs of the oncoming apocalypse? Maybe you guessed famine, war, or pestilence. Perhaps you said whoever your most hated politician is getting elected. While they're all acceptable answers, consider this one. The sky becomes a deep, bloody red color for a matter of seconds before quickly returning to normal. That is what the residents of Cholucupa, El Salvador experienced in April 2016. The crimson light reportedly filled the sky for only a minute or so before fading away and leaving the atmosphere with a pink tint. Some religious population believe that the red flash is a sign of the oncoming apocalypse described in the book of Revelation in the Bible. Some of the possible explanations include the light being a side effect of the yearly April meteor showers that are often witnessed in that area. This is unlikely, however, because the blood-red sky is a phenomenon that has never been witnessed before. Another possibility is that the light was a reflection of the clouds of the stubble fires made by several nearby sugarcane farmers. Whatever the explanation, it's pretty creepy. Number 4. The Great Attractor. One model of the universe is that which follows the Big Bang, a supergiant explosion some 14 billion years ago, which supposedly sent all matter hurtling outward, leading to an ever-expanding universe. This theory is only one of many for how our universe formed over time, but it does not explain anomalies like the Great Attractor. In the 1970s, we first began to study a strange force about 150 to 250 million light-years away that is pulling toward it the Milky Way and multiple other nearby galaxies. Because of the way the stars in the Milky Way are positioned, we cannot observe what is doing the pulling and have simply dubbed it the Great Attractor. In 2016, a group of international scientists were able to finally look past the Milky Way using the CSIRO's Parkes Radio Telescope and discovered 883 galaxies clustered in that area. While some believe this is the definitive solution to the Great Attractor problem, others suggest that many of these galaxies were pulled to the spot like we are being pulled right now, and that the true cause is still unknown. Number 3. The Taos Hum. Everyone has experienced ringing in their ears at one point or another, and most know of the old wives' tale that blames someone speaking about you as the cause. What is most irritating about this weird audio disturbance is that no one else can hear it. So the first time we experience it, we might think we're going crazy. But what if other people could hear it? The town of Taos in north-central New Mexico is known for its liberal artist community, as well as the several celebrities who have lived there. But it is arguably more famous for the Taos Hum, a noise reported to be heard by 2% of the population, each of whom describe it differently. First reported in the 1990s, the hum has been investigated by the University of New Mexico. While people were adamant that they could hear the sound, no equipment was able to pick up the noise. Explanations for this hum are par for the course. Aliens, government experience, the norm. Until we find a way to detect this sound, our guess is as good as anyone's. Number 2, the Tunguska Event. During the Cold War, everyone feared nuclear destruction. We knew the power of the atom bomb, not only from the many tests, but from the real-world uses at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. At that time, people practically expected fire to fall from the sky, and for land to be flattened all around them. But people in 1908 probably did not expect this. On June 30th, 1908, near the Podkamanyana Tunguska River in Siberia, a massive fireball hurtled toward the ground before exploding about 6 kilometers or 4 miles above the Earth's surface. The explosion killed many animals and completely flattened the forest, sending out a hot shock wave for miles. Visitors of the Vinarva trading post, 64 kilometers or 40 miles from the center of the explosion, were knocked back by the concussive force. Most scientists believe that the fireball was an asteroid or a meteor that simply exploded before it could make contact with the ground due to atmospheric pressure, composition, or a number of other factors. The biggest mystery is that no crater was ever found, meaning no meteor material can be analyzed. It is possible that the object was composed of mostly ice and therefore left no shrapnel, but this is impossible to prove. And number 1, Japanese Atlantis. This one is strange because we might find that this is not a naturally occurring circumstance when the mystery is solved. Atlantis is the mythical underwater city ruled by either Poseidon or Aquaman, depending on whom you ask. As the story originated in Greece, many believe that the possible real-world equivalent is located somewhere in the Mediterranean. Or maybe it's next to Japan. Large stone formations lie below the waters of Yonganuni-jima, Japan. They resemble Egyptian or Aztec pyramids and have been underwater for about 2,000 years. Originally discovered by a local diver in 1986, the formations were thought to be naturally forming, albeit at strangely accurate 90-degree angles. These rock shapes were later theorized to be an ancient city 5,000 years old, knocked into the ocean by a large seismic event. This theory is generally accepted, but not completely proven. Unlike the previous mysteries, this one has a pretty solid answer. And that's it. We've come around to the end of the show. Thanks for getting weird with me today, and as always, thank you for listening to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night. Be good to each other.